I used to think my life was a script I couldn't change. That every day was just a repeat of the last, a story of self-destruction I was forced to act out, line by painful line. My world had shrunk down to the size of my dimly lit apartment, which was basically a stage set with the props of my failure, takeout containers stacked like monuments to procrastination, a laptop glowing with half-finished projects, and the heavy silence of a phone that never seemed to ring with good news. Every morning, I'd wake up with that same heavy feeling in my chest, the dread of knowing I was the lead actor in a tragedy I never auditioned for. The script told me to overeat, so I did. It told me to isolate myself, so I stayed home. It told me to believe I was worthless, and I recited that line to myself until it felt like the gospel truth. I was stuck in a loop, a character trapped by his own terrible narrative. I'd hit rock bottom, and it felt like the final page. It felt like the story was over. But then, I learned a secret that changed everything. I learned that you don't have to burn the book of your life to start over. You don't have to erase your story. You just need to pick up a pen, and write a new line. It sounds simple, almost silly, I know. But that one idea was the start of a journey that took me from the deepest parts of my own personal hell to a life I genuinely never thought was possible. This is the story of how I stopped being a character in a story I hated and became the writer of a new one. This is what happened when I rewrote the script for my life. The final scene of my old life wasn't some big, dramatic movie moment. There was no car crash, no public meltdown. It was quieter, and honestly, a lot worse. It was the silence in my 8-year-old daughter's voice. Her school was having its annual spring concert. For weeks, Lily had been practicing this little violin piece. It was just a few squeaky bars of "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," but to her, it was a symphony. She'd made me pinky swear I'd be in the front row. "You have to be there, Daddy. You have to see me." And of course, I said yes. I put it in my calendar. I set 3 alarms. But the script of my life had other plans. The night before, a familiar tsunami of anxiety and self-loathing hit me. The script told me a single beer would calm me down. Then another. Then some project I'd been putting off for weeks suddenly felt like the most important thing in the world, a task that had to be conquered right then, in the middle of the night. I passed out on the couch at 4 a.m., surrounded by empty chip bags and that crushing weight of failure. The alarms I'd set were just a distant buzz in a dream. I woke up to the sound of my wife, Anna, quietly closing the front door. It was noon. The concert had ended an hour ago. I didn't have to ask what happened. I saw it on her face when she came back. It wasn't anger. It was something far more terrifying, resignation. It was the look of someone who had finally given up hope. Later that evening, I went to tuck Lily into bed. She was facing the wall. I sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "I am so sorry, sweetie. Daddy messed up." She didn't turn around. After a long moment, she just said, in this small, hollow voice, "It's okay. I told my friends you were sick." She was making excuses for me. She was already learning how to edit the story to make my failures easier to swallow. My self-destruction wasn't just mine anymore, it was spilling over, staining the pages of my daughter's life. I was teaching her that promises could be broken, that her dad wasn't someone she could count on. That night, I sat alone in the dark, and for the first time, I didn't try to numb the pain. I just let it wash over me. This wasn't a life. It was a slow-motion collapse. The script I was following wasn't just a tragedy, it was a horror story, and I was the monster. I knew right then, with a certainty that chilled me to my bones, that if I didn't find a way to tear up this script, it would tear apart everything I loved. The final page was coming, and I had to do something, anything, to write a different ending. A week later, I found myself in a place I swore I'd never go, a small, quiet office with a bonsai tree on the windowsill. I was sitting across from Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a therapist a colleague had recommended. He was an older Japanese man with a calm energy that was both grounding and, if I'm being honest, a little unnerving. I spent the first 20 minutes just dumping everything. The missed deadlines, the broken promises, the endless cycle of shame and self-sabotage. I finished with what had become my mantra: I feel like I'm just an actor in a play I hate. The script is already written. I can't change it. Dr. Tanaka listened patiently, his hands resting in his lap. When I was done, he didn't give me any cheap platitudes. He just nodded slowly and said, "I understand. But your metaphor is incomplete. You believe you are only the actor. But you are also the writer." I must have looked totally confused, because he leaned forward. A life is not a fixed manuscript handed down from on high. It is a living document. A new life isn't about erasing the old story, but rewriting it. We can't burn the pages that have already been written, they're part of us. But we can choose the next word. And the word after that. We can edit. We can revise. We can add new chapters. He explained that my problem wasn't the script itself, but my belief that I was powerless to change it. He told me that in Japan, there are age-old philosophies that are basically tools for rewriting your life. He called them the rules of rewriting. The first rule, he began, is to start with a single word. This is the principle of Kaizen. He told me Kaizen is the idea of continuous, small improvements. It's the opposite of trying to make some huge, overwhelming change. Instead of trying to write a whole new book overnight, you just focus on one tiny, almost insignificant word. You feel overwhelmed because you're trying to rewrite the whole tragedy at once, he said. That's impossible. So, we won't do that. For the next week, your only job is this: when you wake up, before you check your phone, before anything, take a notebook and write down one single thing you're grateful for. It can be as simple as the sun, or a hot cup of coffee. Just one word or a short phrase. That's your first edit. I almost laughed out loud. It seemed so small it was crazy. How could writing coffee in a notebook fix the train wreck my life had become? Dr. Tanaka saw the skepticism on my face. Your old script is powerful because it's a deeply ingrained habit. We won't fight it with force. We will undermine it with consistency. This tiny act isn't about fixing your life, it's about proving to yourself that you can, in fact, write a single word of your own choosing. Then he gave me the second rule: find the theme of your new story. This is your Ikigai. He explained that Ikigai is a Japanese concept for your reason for being. It's not just a goal, but a purpose, the central theme that gives your story meaning. Your old script has a theme: I am not worthy. It drives every scene. To write a new story, you need a new, more powerful theme. Why do you want to change, Alex? Not for me. Not for your wife. For you. What is the story you truly want to tell with your life? I thought of Lily. Of her quiet, heartbreaking acceptance of my failure. I thought of Anna's tired eyes. Of the man I once hoped I could be. I want to be present, I said, the words feeling both foreign and true. I want to be a father and a husband who is, just, there. Good, Dr. Tanaka nodded. Presence. That's a powerful theme. Let that be the light that guides every new word you write. Finally, he gave me the third rule. Know when to end the scene. This is the wisdom of Hara Hachi Bu. He explained this was an Okinawan practice of eating until you're 80% full, but the philosophy goes way beyond food. Your old script pushes you to extremes. You work until you're 110% exhausted. You feel shame until you're 110% overwhelmed. The new script has to embrace moderation. Stop at 80%. Work on a task, and when you feel like you've made good progress, but before you're drained, stop. Go for a walk, and when you start to feel tired, but before you're exhausted, turn back. This is what prevents burnout. It makes the act of writing sustainable. You're not running a sprint, you're writing the epic of a lifetime. It requires patience and pace. One word. One theme. One rule to stop. It was the strangest advice I'd ever gotten. It didn't feel like a solution. But it was the first time anyone had ever told me I was the writer, not just the actor. And for some reason, that gave me a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, a tiny, fragile spark of hope. I left his office with a pen and a new, blank notebook. I still wasn't sure what to do, but I knew what I was going to write the next morning. The first few days were, well, pretty anticlimactic. Each morning, I'd wake up with that familiar knot of dread in my stomach. The old script would start playing automatically in my head, whispering about my failures, telling me to just stay in bed. But then I'd remember Dr. Tanaka's first rule, just one word. I'd force myself to sit up, grab the notebook, and write. Day 1, coffee. Day 2, sunlight. Day 3, quiet. It felt ridiculous, like I was throwing a pebble at a tidal wave. My problems were huge, my marriage was strained, my career was about to collapse, my self-esteem was zero. And here I was, writing single words in a cheap notebook. My inner critic, the narrator of my old script, was having a field day. This is your grand plan? Pathetic. You're just wasting time before you fail again. But I kept doing it. Because as small as it was an act of defiance. It was one single moment in the day that I controlled, a single line that I wrote myself. After 2 weeks, I went back to Dr. Tanaka and told him it felt pointless. He just smiled and said, the goal wasn't to feel better. The goal was to prove you could follow your own instruction. You have. Now, for the next step of Kaizen, we add another pebble. My new task was just as small. After writing my gratitude word, I had to put on my running shoes and tie the laces. That's it. I didn't have to run. I didn't even have to stand up. Just put on the shoes. So, my morning ritual became, wake up, feel the dread, write one word, Lily's laugh, then sit on the edge of the bed and lace up my sneakers. Then I'd take them off and start my day. It was absurd. But I was doing it. In the 3rd week, something weird happened. I had my shoes on, and I thought, well, I might as well just stand up. So I did. The next day, I stood up and walked to the front door. The day after that, I opened it and stood on the porch for a minute, breathing in the cool morning air. By the end of the first month, I was walking to the end of the block and back. I remembered Dr. Tanaka's 80% rule, Hara Hachi Bu. The second I felt the first hint of wanting to stop, I'd let myself stop. I didn't push to exhaustion. I ended the scene while I still felt good, which made it so much easier to do it again the next day. These tiny edits started bleeding into other parts of my life. At work, I was facing this mountain of a project I'd been avoiding. Instead of trying to conquer it all at once, I used Kaizen. My only goal for the day was to open the file and read 1 paragraph. The next day, 2 paragraphs. The day after, I wrote 1 sentence. It was painfully slow, but it wasn't 0. And because I was stopping at 80%, I didn't feel that burnout that always led to another cycle of procrastination. My theme, my Ikigai, was presence. So I made a tiny edit there, too. For the first 5 minutes after I got home from work, I would put my phone in a drawer. No emails, no news, no distractions. Just 5 minutes of being fully present with Anna and Lily. The first few times, the urge to check my phone was like a physical itch. But then Lily started showing me her drawings during those 5 minutes. Anna started telling me about her day. It was a tiny scene, but it was a scene from a story I actually wanted to be in. The changes weren't dramatic. There was no movie montage with an uplifting soundtrack. It was slow, quiet work. It was a series of small, almost invisible choices. But for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something shifting. The pages were turning, and even though I didn't know what the next chapter would hold, I knew with a quiet and growing confidence, that I was the one writing it. I was about 6 months into my rewriting process. I'd lost a little weight from my daily walks. My project at work was actually back on track. I hadn't missed a single morning in my gratitude journal. The 5 minutes of phone-free time after work had stretched to 15. I was feeling good. I was starting to believe that the old script had finally lost its power. And that's when it came roaring back. It was the holiday season, which has always been a minefield for me. The pressure to be happy, the family gatherings, the total disruption of my routine, it was the perfect storm. It started at a work party. Just one drink, I told myself. But that one drink felt so good, such a familiar comfort, that the old script just took over. 1 became 4. I came home late, breaking my promise to Anna that we'd wrap presents together. The next morning, I woke up with a crushing sense of shame. The voice of the old narrator was deafening. See? You imposter. You fraud. You can write all the happy little words you want in your notebook, but this is who you really are. A failure. That day, I didn't write in my journal. I didn't put on my shoes. The shame was a thick, heavy blanket, and I just surrendered to it. For the next week, the old script was in complete control. I went back to overreading, to isolating myself, to endless, mindless scrolling on my phone. Every choice felt like a confirmation of my own worthlessness. I hadn't just slipped, I had fallen all the way back to the bottom. Defeated, I made another appointment with Dr. Tanaka. I walked into his office feeling like a complete fool. I failed, I said, my voice cracking. I tried to write a new story, but the old one is just too strong. It's the real me. Dr. Tanaka listened, his expression unchanged. When I was finished, he walked over to his bonsai tree and gently touched one of its gnarled, twisted branches. In Japan, he said softly, we have an aesthetic and philosophy called Wabi-Sabi. It is the appreciation of beauty in things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. He pointed to a faint crack in the ceramic pot. This pot is not perfect. The tree is not symmetrical. But these imperfections don't make them less beautiful. They are part of its story. They are proof that it has lived. He turned back to me. You believe you have failed because your new script wasn't perfect. You had a relapse. You fell. But a relapse is not a failure, Alex. It is part of the editing process. It is a rough draft. He then told me the 4th rule of rewriting, embrace the rough draft. A story isn't written perfectly the first time. There are typos. There are plot holes. There are scenes that have to be deleted and rewritten. Your setback isn't proof that the old script is true. It is a note from the editor, which is you, showing you where the story is still weak, where it needs more reinforcement. Something about that just clicked. I hadn't failed. I was just editing. And this, Dr. Tanaka said, his voice firm but kind, leads to the final and most important rule. Gambaru. He explained that the word roughly means, to persevere, to slog on tenaciously through tough times. It's the commitment to see something through to the end. The goal is not to write a perfect script. The goal is not to never make a mistake again. The goal is to simply keep writing. Gambaru is the act of picking up the pen the very next day, especially when you don't want to, and writing the next line. Even if it's a shaky, uncertain line. You just keep writing. I left his office not with that bubbly optimism I had before, but with a quiet, steely resolve. The next morning, the shame was still there. The voice of the old script was still whispering its poison. But I sat up. I opened my notebook. And with a hand that trembled a little, I wrote, "Second chances." Then I put on my shoes. A year passed. Not a perfect year, but a persistent one. There were other slips, other moments where the old script tried to take the stage, but each time, I remembered Wabi-Sabi and Gambaru. I treated each mistake not as a verdict, but as an editor's note. I just kept picking up the pen. The scene of my life looks different now. The dimly lit apartment has been replaced by a home that feels filled with light. It's not that the furniture changed, but the whole atmosphere has. The props are different, too. My running shoes are by the door, worn from use. My gratitude journal is on my nightstand, its pages full. The takeout containers have mostly been replaced by simple, healthy meals Anna and I started cooking together. But the biggest change isn't something you can see. It's something you feel. It's a quiet evening, about 18 months after this all began. I'm at the kitchen table, helping Lily with her math homework. No screens, no distractions. I'm just there. She's struggling with a long division problem, and she's getting frustrated, her brow furrowed exactly the way mine used to. The old script in my head would have been impatient. Anxious about the time, about all the other things I should be doing. But the new script has a different theme, presence. I take a breath and say softly, "Hey, it's okay. These are tough. Let's look at it from another angle." I draw a little diagram, breaking the problem down into smaller pieces, just like Dr. Tanaka taught me to break down my life. We work through it together, step by tiny step. When she finally gets it, a huge grin spreads across her face. She looks up at me, her eyes bright, and says, "Thanks, Dad. You're good at this. You don't get all frustrated anymore." And those words, they landed with the force of a gentle earthquake. It wasn't a big declaration. She didn't say, "You're a new man." She just noticed a small, simple truth. I don't get all frustrated anymore. That was it. That was the proof. The change wasn't just happening inside me anymore, it was being felt by the people I loved the most. Later that night, Anna finds me just sitting on the bed, looking at my hands. She sits down next to me. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. I hold up my hands. "I was just thinking, these are the hands that wrote the new script," I say, a little bit of awe in my voice. "They're not perfect. They're still clumsy sometimes. But they're mine. And they're still writing." She takes my hand and squeezes it. "I know," she says, her voice full of a warmth I thought I had lost forever. "And it's a beautiful story." So, what happened when I wrote a new script for my life? Everything. And nothing. There was no single, dramatic event. No lottery win, no overnight transformation. It was a quiet revolution, fought and won in the small, ordinary moments of every single day. It was choosing to write one word of gratitude instead of hitting snooze. It was choosing to put on my shoes. It was choosing to be present for 5 minutes. It was choosing to see a setback as part of the process, not a final judgment. The most important thing I learned is that you are the writer. Your life is not some fixed story you're forced to act out. It's a living manuscript, and you are holding the pen. You can't erase the chapters that are already written, they're part of your journey, part of your strength. But you can always, always write a new line. You can start a new paragraph. You can decide on a new theme. Change isn't about becoming a different person, it's about becoming more of who you were always meant to be, one word at a time. So here's my challenge to you. Don't try to rewrite your whole life tomorrow. Just focus on the next line. For the next 14 days, I want you to pick one tiny word to add to your script. One microscopic change. Maybe it's drinking one glass of water when you wake up. Maybe it's writing down one thing you're proud of. Maybe it's just stretching for 60 seconds. Whatever it is, make it ridiculously small, and commit to it. In the comments below, tell me what your first word, your first tiny edit, is going to be. Let's start rewriting together.